set of keys up here, which we think are state government vehicle keys. So if somebody is missing those, we'd sure like to be able to take care of it. Okay?
If
Nothing else, we could probably get them back to fleet.
Okay. All right, Tony, you're up. Help us out, buddy.
All right.
River Fishing Outlook.
welcome back. We do have 2 or 3 additional information items for you. We're going to kind of shift gears.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about Missouri River fisheries. We have Hillary Meyer here as a fisheries biologist here at our Fort Pierre District office to give you a little overview of how things are looking for Missouri River fisheries this year.
All right. Welcome.
Thank you, Tony. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to give everyone a little brief update on the Missouri River, and the data that I'm going to present today was collected last year by our office, so this is all our data from 2014. And then at the very end, I'll go through the different research projects that we have coming up this year. Those projects will last throughout this summer and then a year or 2 afterwards. So to begin, the general outline for this talk, I'll go through all the different reservoirs on the Missouri River, starting from Lake Oahe, going south all the way through Lewis and Clark. And as I mentioned, talk about a little bit about the ongoing research projects that we have. So each lake update is going to look very similar. So first I'll talk about the prey fish status in each reservoir, and then a little bit about our walleye population data, and present a little of our creel data from our angler use surveys, and then go into other sport fish populations that we have on each reservoir that are of interest to our anglers. So first up is the Lake Oahe cold water prey fish. We survey these fish with our hydroacoustic surveys, and this is just an example of what one of our outputs look like for that survey. So essentially it's just a souped up depth finder that we use. And we drive 20 transects across the lake all the way from Pollock by the North Dakota border down to the face of the dam. And what you can see here, this is Little Bend from last year. This green line is actually the lake bottom. And then all these little blue dots along here, these are fish that we refer to them as targets, but these are all fish. So we'll take the computer program associated with our hydroacoustics equipment, and it'll enumerate all these fish and count them for us, and we'll get an estimate of rainbow smelt. The bad news for Lake Oahe is that we did not catch any rainbow smelt in our cold water gill nets. Oops. This is a picture of our gill nets. So we go and do these hydroacoustic surveys, and then the next day our field biologists go out and they'll set these nets at these same transects that we did these hydroacoustic surveys on, and they go out and they try and see what these targets are that we're marking on our hydroacoustics. And this is also from Little Bend, so all of these are age 0 lake herring, and that's pretty much all of what we're seeing here in this in our picture that we got from our survey. So we had a huge year class of lake herring this year. We also had a pretty large class of lake herring last year. So this picture down here on the bottom, this is an age 0 fish. This is probably a 1-year-old fish, and then these are 2 and maybe 3-year-old fish. So we have a lot of these fish in our system right now. So even though we don't have very many rainbow smelt in Lake Oahe, our age 0 rainbow smelt numbers our estimates were very low for the 2014 season. But we see this little uptick between 2013 and 2014 for age 1 rainbow smelt, so we're hoping that the post-2011 flood that the rainbow smelt are on their way back up. And this bottom graph where we have our other prey, we see this uptick here, and we think that that's probably attributed to the lake herring that we've seen those 2 large year classes on. So things are looking good in that respect, that we have a lot of cold water prey fish out there. As far as our warm water prey fish, we sample these the same on all 4 reservoirs. So we use this shoreline seine is what this is. So we have one person stand here on shore. You can see their hand in the end of the seine here. And then the boat operator goes straight out from shore, and then he makes a quarter arc all the way back to shore. And so that targets all these warm water bait fish and age 0 sport fish that'll inhabit the shoreline here. In Lake Oahe, we actually had the largest prey fish abundance that we've seen in the last 30 years this past year in 2014. And it's actually double what our previous highest warm water prey fish numbers were. And that mainly consisted of age 0 white bass, age 0 black crappie, age 0 yellow perch, and a lot of emerald shiners. So we have a lot of prey out there right now for our walleye fishery. In our walleye abundance, we use gill nets in August to target our walleyes in Lake Hawaii and as well as in Lake Sharp. And you can see since the 2011 flood, we've had a steady decline in walleye abundance, and we expected this to happen after our forage base collapse, the rainbow smelt were entrained through the dam. So abundance is down slightly from the previous years, but our average for Lake Hawaii is right around 17 fish per net, so we're not too far below our average long-term abundance. And you can actually see from 2013 we've had a little bit of an increase in those 15-inch fish, this green bar. So those fish between the 15 and 20-inch size, we're seeing a few more of those show up in our surveys, so we're looking forward to that for the 2015 fishing season. As far as our Oahe Creel survey, where we interview our anglers, we had about an average amount of pressure compared to the previous 20 or so years that we have data for. Catch and harvest rates were slightly down from 2012 and 2013, but we had a good number of 15 and 16-inch walleye in the creel, with our average size being just under 15 inches. And overall, our satisfaction from our anglers, our rating was 82%, so most people were pretty happy with their fishing experience on Lake Hawaii last year. Our Chinook salmon fishery, our harvest was low. 122 fish were taken out of Lake Hawaii, but I do want to mention that our creel survey was reduced this last year. So normally we do a creel survey from April through October, and this year we were forced to kind of downgrade our creel survey just due to some staffing issues, and we creeled May, June, and July, so we missed September, October, which are the big months for our salmon creel. But our returns to the spawning station on Whitlock's Bay was increased from last year. We had just under 340 fish returned, but the really nice thing to see is the average weight was very good on these fish. These fish were in very good condition. You can see this fish that our senior biologist is holding there looks very healthy. This is actually salmon from our cold water gill net survey, and you can see these are all those age 0 lake herring that I mentioned before, so those salmon were really taking advantage of that, those cold water prey fish that were available this past year. Lake Sharp, our warm water prey fish abundance was pretty good. It was the 8th highest year on record, and that mainly consisted of gizzard shad, which is pretty normal for Lake Sharp. There's a lot of age 0 gizzard shad. We also had a lot of emerald shiners, as well as yellow perch and white bass. And our walleye abundance on Lake Sharp is down slightly. Our average for the last 20 or so years is right around 16 fish per net, so our abundance is down. But one thing to note, you can't see it on this graph because it's not broken out into age sizes, but we've had the last 2 years we expect to have pretty good age classes coming up, so we hope to see these numbers of fish increase in the next few years. In our Lake Sharp creel survey, we had above average pressure on Lake Sharp. Our catch rates did remain pretty high compared to the last few years. Our harvest rates were a little bit lower than 2013, and that's probably mostly because we saw that decrease in the fish that were over 15 inches. But our harvest rates were still above average for the Lake Sharp long-term average. And even better than Lake Hawaii, we had 89% satisfied anglers, so they gave us a thumbs up on Lake Sharp. And Lake Sharp, we also have a rainbow trout fishery. We stocked 6,400 catchable size rainbow trout this past April in Hawaii Marina. We've seen a few of those return to the creel already. And we also have the opportunity, some of these fish will survive over the winter and the summer months and return the following spring, and people can target them in the marina. And we've seen a few of these show up just through anecdotal reports from anglers. This fall, we have plans to stock 3,200 more fish in the Hawaii Marina. Lake Francis Case, our warm water prey fish was about normal, and similar to Lake Sharp, age 0 gizzard shad are going to be the main forage base this year. And we also saw a lot of emerald shiners in Francis Case, as well as yellow perch. Our walleye abundance in Francis Case is down slightly. You can see it's pretty variable over the last 30 years or so. One thing to note is we have some strong year classes coming through from 2012 and 2014. So we're hoping that these 2012 fish should be reaching that 15-inch size range that will make them available to the anglers. So we should see that the number of 15-inch fish increase this coming summer for our anglers. From our creel survey, catch rates remained high in Francis Case, similar to the last few years. Harvest rates were pretty average. Average size was 14 to 16-inch fish, and condition was pretty good. And similar to our other 3 reservoirs, we got a thumbs up from our anglers. So things are looking pretty good on those 3 reservoirs. And paddlefish on Lake Francis Case, we don't have a lot of information on this because the season just ended this past Sunday. Most of the fish were caught at the beginning of the season, and our biologists think that that's because the White River was flowing at 10,000 cubic feet per second towards in the latter half of the month, so it made it really difficult for anglers to target paddlefish. But they did hear some reports of 80 and 90-pound fish, and there's a rumor of a couple 100-pound fish, but those have yet to be verified. They collected broodstock 2 weeks ago, and just an interesting note, this was a female that we collected exactly 2 weeks ago. She was 126 pounds, and they also collected another female that was 129 pounds. So they had a pretty successful broodstock collection season this year. Lewis and Clark warm water prey fish. This was one of the lowest prey fish abundances we have on record for Lewis and Clark. And the main forage base in 2014 was Emerald Shiner. Our walleye abundance is somewhat low. Lewis and Clark Reservoir is sort of interesting because we have smaller year classes in the years where we have more water. So in 2011, the flood of 2011, 2012, when we had high water, we see lower production in those years. So we see a subsequent reduction in our abundance. But we are hopeful because we've had these 2013 and 2014, these should be some pretty strong year classes for us. So hopefully in the next few years they'll show up and become available to anglers in Lewis and Clark. And in Lewis and Clark we don't have a creel survey, but just in general what anglers can expect is that we had, as I mentioned, good numbers of age 0 fish in 13 and 14. And the catch rates they're guessing are going to be similar to previous years. One thing that was positive is that the condition was above average in that reservoir, so the fish looked very, very healthy. And on to our ongoing research projects, and they're actually working on this as we speak, gizzard shad trap and transfer efforts. So we go down to Hipple Lake and we'll electrofish for gizzard shad and collect as many as we can. Usually we shock in the afternoons, and so maybe we'll collect 200 fish on a good day. We'll take those fish back to the ramp and we'll put them into our transfer tanks, our transfer trucks, and we'll take them up to Lake Oahe to try and supplement some of the embayments on Lake Oahe. So for example, yesterday they stocked about 150 fish into Cowan Spring and Okobojo embayments. And then in the summertime and early fall, we'll go up into those embayments and we'll look for these age 0 fish to see if those gizzard shad that we stocked, if they reproduce, and then these fish will just provide a little bit of extra food for our walleye population up above the dam. And this year, our goal is to move 2,000 shad up into Lake Oahe. And as many of you are probably familiar with, the 2011 flood had some pretty devastating impacts on Hipple Lake. The channel there is pretty much closed to all boat traffic, and it's becoming more filled in with sediment as the years go by. So we're really concerned about this because we've always thought that a lot of our gizzard shad production on Lake Sharp happens in Hipple Lake, and that's our #1 forage fish in that lake. So if Hipple were to become disconnected from the main reservoir, we have concerns that our gizzard shad production might become low, and so therefore our prey base might collapse underneath the walleye fishery. So one of our graduate students is looking at the source of these gizzard shad. So he collected age 0 gizzard shad last summer, and he's also working on collecting them this summer as well. to look at where these fish are being produced. And it turns out that almost 50% are produced in Hippo Lake and Laframboise. So those two backwater areas are pretty important to Lake Sharp gizzard shad production, as well as the Bad River here. You can see that's almost 30% of our gizzard shad are produced in the Bad River. We also are performing a gizzard shad telemetry project that'll go hand in hand with this work that the graduate students doing on our gizzard shad in Hippo Lake. So similar to the trap and transfer efforts, we go out and we electrofish for gizzard shad, and when we collect them, we'll implant them with ultrasonic transmitters. And throughout the reservoir, we've placed these passive receivers. So these receivers right here, they'll detect in a range sort of in a balloon shape above them, about a half mile in range. So anytime a fish will swim by that, we can it'll detect that and give us an exact frequency, and we'll know where that fish was tagged at, where it's moved, and how long it's spent in those areas. We also do some active tracking as well. We did some active tracking under the ice this year and located a few fish. We found 8 of the 20 fish in Hippo Lake during the wintertime, so that was pretty interesting, because we've always thought that they've overwintered there, but we don't actually have any evidence for that until now. And we'll also actively track in a boat this summer as well. And this is a map of Lake Sharp, and all these red stars are passive receivers. So you can see we have receivers all the way from Hawaii Marina, all the way down the reservoir, down to Counselor Creek here. So I believe next week or the following week, we'll be going out and pulling these receivers and downloading this information. And so we're really excited to see what was going on over the winter months. So that'll be pretty interesting. And as I mentioned before, in Lake Sharp, we stocked 6,400 rainbow trout. We also stocked 20 fish that were transplanted or implanted with telemetry tags. This is an example of one of the acoustic tags. They're very similar to the ones that we put in the gizzard shad. So 20 of those fish were implanted with tags, and we hope to follow these fish and see what their fate is, because we see a few of these rainbow trout ending up in our creel surveys, but we don't see very many of them. So we'd like to know, when we stock them in the marina, are they there for a few days? Are they there for a few weeks? Are they available to our anglers? Do they overwinter? What's their survival like? So in addition to those receivers that we have out for gizzard shad, they'll also pick up these rainbow trout tags. And we also have a joint project with the Fish and Wildlife Service here in Pierre, where we transplanted 20 adult paddlefish from Lake Francis Case into Lake Sharp to look at movements and what kind of habitats these fish might use. So similar techniques that we use, we implanted fish, or the Fish and Wildlife Service actually implanted fish with these sonic tags, and then they released them into Lake Sharp at the Bad River and in Hippo Lake, and they'll go out and actively track those fish. As of last week, of the 20 that they implanted, they were able to locate 12 of those fish. And interestingly enough, they have a receiver down at Big Bend Dam. They picked up 2 of those fish at Big Bend Dam, and about 5 days later, they were in the Stilling Basin below Hawaii Dam, and one was just outside of Laframboise Island, so those fish are moving a lot in Lake Sharp. And another tagging study we have going on is our Lake Hawaii salmon tagging. So typically, we've always stocked salmon in Whitlock's Bay, and we see different survival rates throughout the different years. And one reason we think that that's the case is due to predation. And we think that these fish, as soon as we stock them in, are just pretty much being eaten by mostly walleye, is what we're guessing. So we wanted to look at what would happen if we stock them at 4 different sites, if that might help increase their survival and in turn increase their return to our anglers, because we actually have fairly low return of Chinook salmon to our anglers. So we tagged a number of fish with coated wire tags. And these are the coated wire tag machines that we use in the hatchery. And we'll tag those fish and release them at these 4 different sites. And based on our tag returns from our anglers, we'll be able to tell, are some of these stocking sites working better than others? One thing that we're worried about is if these sites are too close to the dam, are they being entrained through the dam? And so far, we've got pretty low tag return numbers, 13 out of, I'm not sure, probably close to 200,000 tags, but these fish are also only 2 years old, and we typically don't see them in the creel until they're 3 to 5. So this study won't be complete until 2019, when we see these fish returning both back to the spawning station and into our creel. And finally, our Lake Oahe walleye tagging project, which is a joint project with SDSU. This past year we tagged just over 9,000 walleye, and that makes for a total that's just under 30,000 walleye in the last 3 years that we've tagged. And our tag returns, I don't have the exact numbers from the graduate student yet, but it's somewhere around 2,000 tags or so. And the reason that we're looking at this study is to look at movements of walleye within Lake Oahe, look at entrainment rates through Oahe Dam, and also look at mortality, because we really don't have a very good idea of what our natural and fishing mortality are. So this tagging study will really help our understanding of our walleye population. And finally, we have a rainbow smelt project that's starting this summer. So we have a PhD student at SDSU that'll be starting, and he'll be going along with us on our hydroacoustic surveys and just trying to refine our methods to see if there's a better way that we can be monitoring our rainbow smelt population. We've been doing the same thing for the last 20 or so years, but there's new methods out there, and so he's going to look at all these different methods and sort of compare the estimates of rainbow smelt abundance and see what will work best for Lake Oahe. And part of that too is we'd like to try and identify some of these spawning locations for a rainbow smelt, because we do see these large changes in our population, and we can't really do anything about that, but if we can if we can make our spawning habitat better, that might at least help mitigate those effects that we can't control. So that's all I have for you on the Missouri River update.
Questions for Heather?
Did you memorize all that? Very nice report.
Thank you.
So walleye numbers looks like historically low, aren't they?
In which reservoir?
Well, in the dams down through there, like those first slides weren't and yet fishing is pretty good, is it?
Well, yeah, and it's difficult because our gear that we use for walleye. So, for example, we went out, I believe it was the second week of August, and we do our survey. And we went out a few weeks later and repeated it, same exact sites and everything, and our catches were much higher. So it depends a lot on the water conditions, so temperature and weather patterns and that. So there's a lot of other things that could be going on there. So this is just it gives us a general idea of what's going on with the population. But catches have remained pretty good throughout the 4 reservoirs.
Good job. Everybody okay? Thanks, Hillary. Really nice job.